September 13th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with the stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's trip to Russia. The regime's leader said his visit shows how seriously North Korea is taking its strategic ties with Russia, before he is widely believed to hold summit talks with Vladimir Putin at a space launch center as early as today. And the U.S. is keeping close tabs on the two countries' much speculated arms deal, sending defense and commerce officials to South Korea this week to discuss ways to penalties for the weapons and negotiations. South Korea's national football team secured its first win under head coach Jurgen Klinsmann by defeating Saudi Arabia 1-0 on Tuesday. The Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin summit is looking likely to be held at a Russian spaceport, possibly today. And the North Korean leader is calling his Russia trip as a means of highlighting strategic ties with Moscow. Our North Korean affairs correspondent Lee Dae-hyun with the details.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said his first visit to Russia in 4 years was a distinctive expression to highlight the strategic importance of Pyongyang-Moscow relations. The train that Kim had taken to travel to Russia arrived in the border city of Hasan on Tuesday at 6 a.m. local time, according to the North's state-run Korean Central News Agency on Wednesday. Kim was greeted by Russian central and local government officials, including the Minister of Natural Resources and Environment and the governor of Primorsky Krai. The officials said that they were sent by Russian President Vladimir Putin to welcome Kim. The North Korean leader, after his arrival, said that he's glad to visit Russia for his first time in 4 years. KCNA reported that Kim had departed to his next spot after receiving a welcome gift, but did not reveal where exactly that place was. But citing Russian sources, Japan's Kyodo News reported that the place where Kim will meet with his Russian counterpart will likely be a Russian spaceport, the Vostochny Cosmodrome in the Amur Oblast in the Russian Far East. It also added that the two leaders are expected to visit an aircraft plant in Komsomolsk-on-Amur after their talks. This comes as it was announced that Putin would visit the spaceport after a session at the Eastern Economic Forum. Analysts say that the meeting at the spaceport symbolizes the two leaders' intention to show their will for military cooperation, especially in the space technology sector. The aircraft plant, too, is also relatable to their potential military ties, as the plant produces a range of fighter jets, including high-tech fifth-generation jets. A shipyard to launch attack submarines is also located in that area, too, which could interest the North as it recently launched its first tactical nuclear submarine earlier this month. More concerns are about to come, with close military ties between the two appearing to be just around the corner. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang News.
And Washington says it will not hesitate to take action if Pyongyang does provide weapons to Moscow. And U.S. defense and commerce officials are also coming to Seoul to discuss the arms deal as well as export controls. Lee Seung-ja has more.
Washington says it will not hesitate to take action if Pyongyang does forge ahead with providing weapons to Moscow as speculated, following the upcoming summit between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and Russian President Vladimir Putin. According to U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller on Tuesday, any arms transfer from North Korea to Russia would violate multiple UN Security Council resolutions.
And we, of course, have aggressively enforced our sanctions against entities that fund Russia's war effort, and we will continue to enforce those sanctions and will not hesitate to impose new sanctions if appropriate.
When asked if Russia can unilaterally lift UNSC resolutions against North Korea following comments from the Kremlin that Russia may be willing to discuss the lifting of sanctions currently imposed on North Korea with Pyongyang if necessary, Miller simply said no, adding that Russia cannot take unilateral actions related to the United Nations Security Council. Meanwhile, U.S. defense and commerce officials are set to visit Seoul to discuss the possible arms deal between North Korea and Russia with South Korean government officials. According to the Pentagon, Acting Undersecretary for Defense for Policy Sasha Baker will visit South Korea later this week to take part in the fourth meeting of the Extended Deterrence Strategy and Consultation Group, where she will also meet government and military leaders to discuss the current security environment. U.S. Deputy Secretary of Commerce Don Graves will also visit Seoul next week to discuss ways to strengthen export controls currently in place against Russia. The U.S. is actively pushing for ways to respond to a North Korea-Russia arms deal, as U.S. Deputy Special Envoy for North Korea Jung Pak said Monday that the Kim-Putin meeting might be the final step before the countries strike an arms deal. 이승재, Arirang News.
So Kim Jong-un's Russia trip reflects North Korea's desire to keep things tight with Russia. The regime's leader himself said so. Let's talk more about the upcoming Kim-Putin summit with Dr. Xiaoyu Pu this morning. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Dr. Pu, North Korea-Russia relations appear to be quite important to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un at the moment. What's your take on Kim's statement ahead of the Kim-Putin summit?
I think North Korea leader prioritize North Korea's ties with Russia because the two countries are badly need each other right now because Russia need weapons from North Korea and North Korea need financial aid, foreign food aid, and also advanced space and military technology. I think these two countries are also isolated by the West. I think that showcase how much they need each other.
Right, they are really dependent on each other more than ever. Now, the Kim-Putin summit is widely believed to take place in the Amur region, where a Russian spaceport is located. Now, why do you think they've chosen this place out of all the possible spots? I mean, what significance does the place hold?
This showcase military cooperation, particularly in space technology, might be an important component of their cooperation. And for Putin, he wants to showcase Russia is still a superpower in military and space technology, despite all the international sanctions. And North Korea really need to learn something about the space technology from Russia. So this might showcase maybe space technology, military technology is a key component of their dialogue.
Right, especially when North Korea is so desperate to make its first spy satellite launch successful, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And in the meantime, the Chinese media outlets, they're saying U.S. sanctions have made the North and Russia become closer than ever. Dr. Pu, is that so? I mean, how does China see Pyongyang and Moscow tightening their ties and deepening military cooperation beyond their friendship?
I think, North Korea's relationship with Russia, goes back to the Soviet Union era, like the Cold War era. So it's beyond the current sanctions. But the Western sanctions definitely further strengthen sort of the need of these two countries. They have no other options. No other good options in terms of economic military cooperation. So I think the sanctions definitely narrow their options and push them closer together. From Beijing's perspective, I think Beijing should be very prudent, very cautious. On the one hand, China has strong ties with both Russia and North Korea, but these are two partners that sometimes also regarded as a strategic liability for China. Sometimes North Korea could be a troublemaker for China in regional diplomacy and other issues. I think Russia is the same. I think my sense is that Beijing might take a very cautious attitude toward the potential trade arms deals between North Korea and Russia.
Right, China may be walking on eggshells, but do you think Kim-Putin talks will actually redefine or sharpen the partnership between North Korea, Russia, and China? Is the partnership that all the three sides really want?
I think the conventional commentators, especially from Western medias, often put Russia, China, North Korea together as sort of like an anti-Western club. But my observation is that these two countries are different. Russia and North Korea are taking a much more confrontational approach toward the West. China is different to some degree because China has much broader economic ties with the West. As a UN Security Council permanent member, China must be very cautious regarding any violation of UN Security Council resolutions regarding North Korea. So I think China must be very careful. I think North Korea and Russia are taking a much more confrontational approach.
Right, and especially when China has the least to get out of that partnership.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And the Kremlin also said the leader Putin will meet Chinese leader Xi Jinping within the year. Why do you think Russia has decided to make that announcement like now when Kim Jong-un is visiting?
I think this is showcase that Putin is very isolated internationally. I think he is very desperate to show that he still has powerful friends in case of China's top leader Xi Jinping. And also China is planning to host the third international forum of BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. China has already invited Putin. So I think Putin is definitely visiting Beijing, but this shows that Putin is really very desperate to demonstrate he still has some international friends, including China's top leaders.
Right. Dr. Pu, before I let you go, if, the U.S. has warned of slapping more sanctions and possibly export controls on Russia if North Korea and Russia do make those arms deals, now, do you think those sanctions will actually help the two countries stop from making those negotiations?
I think definitely the United States will upgrade some kind of sanctions. But unfortunately, I think the real effects will be very limited because number one, these countries are already on multiple sanction lists. And the number two, regarding UN Security Council resolution, anything related to that also largely depend on how strict China will implement that. I think in terms of implementation, I think there's a lot of challenges going forward.
Definitely. All right, Dr. Pu, thank you so much for joining us this morning. You have a good evening.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you.
The earthquake death toll in Morocco has exceeded 2,900 now. The country was especially vulnerable to such a natural disaster, given the nature of the earthquake and poorly built buildings there. Our Yoon tells us more.
A rare massive earthquake that hit Morocco was the deadliest to strike the North African country in 120 years. The magnitude 6.8 quake, which sent people scrambling out of their beds in terror and turned villages into rubble last Friday night, left thousands dead and injured, with the death toll likely to rise farther. The epicenter of the quake that was felt all over the country was located 75 kilometers southwest of the city of Marrakesh, a mountainous rural area near the Atlas Mountains that was not usually known for active temblors. So what exactly caused it?
The mechanism of the Morocco quake was different from other earthquakes. It occurred as tectonic plates under Africa and Eurasia collided with a phenomenon called reverse fault, where the edge of the rock on one side of a fault slips under the other.
During the earthquake, the edge that lies towards the mountain slid over the other, pushing the mountain side up, a knock-on consequence of the tension between the African and Eurasia plates that built up over time. As the quake occurred in a mountainous area, damage was more extensive due to landslides. One of the reasons behind the extensive damage was the construction quality of the buildings. According to Reuters, rescuers said the traditional mud brick houses crumbled, reducing the chances of finding survivors.
After structural standards are met, the government should focus on early earthquake alerts. Utilizing seismological observations can make a big difference by providing an initial warning. Individuals should also remember to stay in a building while there's still movement and to quickly find a safe way out when it stops.
Experts also added that while Morocco's earthquake was hard to predict, governments need to invest in buildings designed to withstand earthquakes in order to minimize damage and casualties despite the cost. Yoon, Arirang News.
President Yoon Suk-yeol is likely to name new ministers of defense, culture, and gender equality on Wednesday, speeding up replacements following the defense minister's resignation the day before. According to a presidential official, the top office has been angling for a minor cabinet reshuffle, with Yoon having been briefed on pending issues following his return from a week of summit meetings in Indonesia and India. To lead Defense, People Power Party lawmaker and former Army Lieutenant General Shin Won-sik is likely a candidate. For Culture, Yoo In-chun, the former minister and recently appointed presidential advisor for culture, is reportedly up for the job. As for the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family, Kim Heng, a former spokesperson and director of Korea Gender Equality Education Promotion Agency, is considered the top candidate. The South Korean national football team defeated Saudi Arabia 1-0 on Tuesday, giving head coach Jurgen Klinsmann the first win since taking charge. Playing at St. James Park in Newcastle in England, South Korean striker Cho Kyu-sung headed in the match's only goal in the 32nd minute, ending the Taeguk Warriors' 5-game winless streak. It's a vital win for both the team and Klinsmann, as the head coach has been under fire for both his questionable commitment to the job and his tactics. South Korea plays 2 more friendlies at home next month, Tunisia on October 13th and Vietnam on October 17th. D-10 until the start of the Hangzhou Asian Games in China. A 1,000-strong Korean squad will take part, with athletes aged from 11 to over 70 eager to show what they've got. Our Song Yu-jin has the story.
With just a little over a week left until the Hangzhou Asian Games begin, Team Korea gathered on Tuesday for an inaugural ceremony. While athletes for each sport have already been selected, this ceremony marks the official launching of the national team. There, athletes showed their determination and competitive spirit, from the youngest to the oldest.
I'm honored to be the youngest on the national team, but I don't want to stop here. I want to win a medal and promote Korean chess to the world.
Competing in the Asian Games is like a surprise gift to me. I'm eager to show everything I've prepared until now.
More than 700 athletes and coaching staff participated in the ceremony. Park Bo-gyun, South Korea's Minister of Culture, Sports and Tourism, delivered President Yoon Suk-yeol's message that the athletes' unwavering determination and passion would undoubtedly resonate with the Korean people and bring them joy. Team Korea, in return, promised to do their best.
We hope that the sweat and toil of our athletes won't be defined by the colour of medals. It would be great if those at home find joy in athletes giving their all and leaving it all out there. We also hope that lesser-known sports can gain more recognition.
South Korea is sending a record number of 11,140 athletes and team officials in 39 sports to the 16-day Games. The goal is to rank 3rd out of 45 participating countries in the overall medal ranking, as it did 5 years ago in Jakarta. As anticipation builds and excitement mounts, all that's left now is Team Korea to showcase its skills and dedication. 송유진, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn to stories from around the world. We begin in eastern Libya, where more than 5,000 people are believed to be dead and another 10,000 are missing following devastating floods. Now, that's according to figures from Libya's eastern government on Tuesday. It comes after heavy rains over the weekend caused rivers to swell and 2 dams to collapse near the city of Derna. The resulting floods hit the city hardest, washing away entire neighborhoods, downing phone lines and carrying debris into streets. A quarter of the city is thought to have been wiped out. Tens of thousands of military personnel have been deployed, and some foreign aid has also arrived. But the destruction has made it difficult for rescue workers to enter the city, as well as other affected areas. In the United States, Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy has launched an impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden, and this is ahead of the 2024 presidential election. Announced on Tuesday, it will look into allegations of abuse of power, obstruction and corruption by the president. Republicans have investigated Biden since January, but have yet to find evidence to support their claims against the president. But they have found dealings from the president's son, Hunter Biden, that they have called questionable. The White House has responded, calling the investigation extreme politics at its worst. It comes as McCarthy is facing pressure from right-wing House Republicans to investigate the Biden family. Now, a Russian passenger plane was forced to make an emergency landing in a cornfield in Siberia after one of its hydraulics systems failed. None of the 170 people on board were injured in the incident on Tuesday. The Ural Airlines Airbus A320 was on its way from Sochi to Omsk when pilots noticed a hydraulic system fault and chose to land in the nearby field. Loss of the hydraulics system can sometimes lead to a loss of flight control. Russia's aviation agency has launched an investigation into the crash landing and has suspended the flight crew. And Russian aviation experts say that the landing may have been unnecessary, as the plane should have had backup systems. Ural Airlines has also denied that it cannot do maintenance on its planes due to sanctions on Russia that limit access to spare parts. And finally, a precious Vincent van Gogh painting that was stolen in March 2020 has been returned, covered in bubble wrap inside an IKEA bag. Now, the 139-year-old painting was handed over to Dutch art detective Arthur Brand on Monday at his home from a tipster not involved in the artwork's theft. The tipster handed over the masterpiece in exchange for anonymity. The painting, known as the Parsonage Garden at Nuenen in spring, is an early piece by Van Gogh. It was stolen while on temporary exhibition at the Singer Laren Museum near Amsterdam. The thief was eventually arrested and sentenced in 2021 after the painting had already exchanged hands. But the conviction meant that the painting had lost value and was risky to possess, leading to its return.
Good morning. It looks to be a rainy Wednesday. Rain clouds are dropping showers to central parts of the country this morning, while parts of east of Gangwon-do province is under heavy rain alerts, getting 20 to 40 millimeters an hour of downpours. East of Gangwon-do is forecast to receive heavy rainfall into tomorrow at dawn. Expect to see up to 100 millimeters of showers if you're there. The rest of the country will see 10 to 60 millimeters along with thunder and lightning. Now, today's unexpected nationwide rainfall brings early autumn heat wave relief to the country for the day. Highs will be 3 to 7 degrees lower than Tuesday afternoon. Seoul will be topping out at 24. Daegu will go up to 27 degrees Celsius this afternoon. This round of rain continues into tomorrow morning, and then another band of rain will return to central regions from Friday into Sunday. However, those in certain parts of the country need to keep an umbrella handy. On and off rain will continue through Sunday. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Thursday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, look my way. Make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
웰컴. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arirang TV is conducting a quality and satisfaction evaluation to enhance the broadcast service for viewers worldwide. Please visit our website www.arirang.com to provide your honest opinions. Participants will be entered into a draw for a chance to win prizes. 2023 Overseas TV Viewer Survey. We look forward to hearing from you.
하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, look my way. Make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
The taste of Namdo, bridging the world. Unfolding in the romantic city of Yosu, Jeonnam. The 29th Namdo Food Festival is going to be held from October 6th to October 8th. A place where flavors transform into art and tastes become cherished memories. Relish the autumnal charm of Namdo, which nourishes both the soul and the senses in the vibrant city of Yosu, synonymous with romance and vitality. Feel and taste the origin of K-food to the distinguished 29th Namdo Food Festival. We warmly invite you all.
We're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's September 13th here in Seoul. I'm Yoon, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Chi-Ji-hee.
Good morning, Yoon.
Good morning, and Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
Now, both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. As part of efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and slow down climate change, Seoul City will be introducing a new all-in-one climate card next year. This monthly pass gives unlimited rides on Seoul's buses, subway, and even the bicycle sharing system, and the pass costs around $48 a month. It will have a trial run from January to May next year, and it's expected to go into full operation in the second half of next year. Moving on, recently researchers in South Korea has found a correlation between COVID-19 and Bell's palsy. This is a condition that causes sudden weakness in facial muscles, causing one's face to droop. And the latest research finds that those who haven't been vaccinated or didn't get their second shot and caught COVID-19 have an 84% higher chance of suffering from Bell's palsy. Those who caught COVID but have been vaccinated still had a 20% higher chance of acquiring this compared to those that haven't been affected with this virus. And here in Korea, a heated topic of discussion is how far production teams at movies and dramas should go to ensure a smooth filming environment. That's because recently a father-to-be shared a post online about how he was stopped from seeing his 33-week pregnant wife, who was admitted to a high-risk maternity ward after having a hemorrhage. Now, while trying to enter the hospital's main building, staff from a drama team stopped him from passing by, saying they were in the middle of a shoot. And the production team of this particular drama has apologized. They said they will be more cautious and try to abide even better to filming regulations agreed upon with the hospital where they're filming. But this hasn't calmed down many online users who heard of this incident. Some mentioned how drama and movie staff are causing a nuisance or inconveniences in public places. And what do you think about this issue, Walter?
Well, I'm really hoping that this is a one-off when it comes to, hospital situations. I really hope that production teams are aware that it is a hospital first, and far down the line, is it a movie or drama production last, or a background for their production. Especially in this sort of situation when you have a father who is deeply distressed and under a lot of panic, wanting to see his wife, and it's sad, a very sad situation. They should have apologized, and they did. And like I said, I just hope this is a one-off, and movie production should really not be in hospitals, I think.
Because as you mentioned, this is a real-life situation. As for the drama team or the movie production team, they're just making a virtual story for people to actually enjoy at home. But we're talking about a life and death situation, right?
Exactly. I feel like Walter can relate very well, as he himself is a father too, has recently had a daughter. And I fully share Walter's opinion. Although the mother wasn't blocked from going to the ward and she wasn't really at risk, I mean, the husband should have been allowed to go. And I feel like you said, these places, these public places aren't just any public place, but it's where life and death situations are faced. And I feel like production teams, they should abide by stricter guidelines and make sure that they prioritize the actual function and operation of these important public places.
And I think it stirred even more anger amongst the public, because this is not a one-time thing. We've seen this happen repeatedly in the past. A lot of controversy because drama teams would apologize temporarily, but we would still see this go on and forth. So we need better regulations. And that was our news feed for this Wednesday. Let's now head straight into our main discussion topic. Mugshots have ignited a fierce debate in Korea. Why? Take a look at the screen to find out.
Mugshots are routine images taken for criminal identification. Unlike most parts of the world, though, Korea doesn't reveal them to the public without the consent of the person involved. That's why heavily photoshopped photos and hard-to-identify old ID cards are often revealed instead. While some criticize Korea's relatively lenient rules when it comes to disclosing a suspect or criminal's mugshots, some say that this is only natural, given that disclosing a criminal's mugshot could be detrimental to their families and an infringement of their human rights.
Today, we're going to be focusing on what we think about revealing personal info about a suspect or their mugshots. So, Chihi, why don't you start us off by explaining how this mugshot controversy has stirred up recently here in South Korea?
Sure. So, as we know, we've seen a lot of violent crimes recently, which has led to the release of criminal identities. And the whole purpose of this is to prevent similar crimes from happening in the future based on the severity of the crime, as well as the availability of the evidence, and also the public interest. And all this, of course, is for the public safety. However, there's been a controversy recently over the effectiveness of the release of these mugshots, and that's because often they're retouched and they don't reflect the actual appearance of the offender in their current state. So this makes it really difficult for members of the public to recognize the offender if they encounter them in the street, for example. And so as a result, there are growing calls for mandatory disclosure of up-to-date mugshots that accurately reflect the current appearance of the criminals.
That's a very good point. Mugshots taken by the police should be disclosed to the public because, as you mentioned, right now in Korea, most of the criminals or suspects' photos are either very heavily photoshopped or old ID photos, which is really hard to see their faces. But what about you, Walter? Could you also explain to us why this mugshot controversy has stirred here in Korea?
Yeah, so actually to talk about what Chihi said earlier as well, like I don't know if even releasing a mugshot will deter a person from committing a crime, even though like in Korea we do cover their faces. But in recent times we've also seen, actually as early as a couple of months ago, the same situation with Jung Yoo-jung, who was the woman in Busan who killed a student. And also, as we just saw then, that was the Hilim-dong sexual assault murderer, Choi Yoon-jung. His picture was released, and luckily I don't think that was photoshopped. It seemed to be a very authentic photo.
It was a mugshot.
It was a mugshot, yes. So, which is in Korean society, as we mentioned earlier, we only release mugshots when it is deemed a heinous crime. However, I just don't think that's a good enough reason. It still baffles me that South Korea actually still has this law to present day when many other countries don't as well. I think it is in the public interest to know what an accused criminal does look like. The argument, as we mentioned before, could be that it ruins a person's reputation, but I would argue that if you are proven innocent, the public will still give you a good reputation. They won't look down on you. They'll even maybe empathize with you.
I think what really shocked the Korean public, though, was that Choi Yoon-jung, the recent, as you mentioned, the Hilim-dong, the assailant there, he was the second one to only have his mugshot revealed to the public. Only the second. And we've seen so many crimes here in Korea. And until now, then, we've only seen criminals' faces through either very heavily photoshopped photos or old photos of them, which is really hard to identify, which is why millennials and Gen Z are calling for a stronger need for South Korea to reveal the mugshots to the public, even though there's debate that this could be an infringement of human rights. Where do you guys stand on that?
Well, let me show you a graph that actually reflects the average opinion of the people here in the country. So if you look on the screen, the pie graph, which is a result of a survey conducted on around 750 South Koreans, revealed that over 95% of the participants believe that revealing mugshots of felony offenders should be mandatory. Now, the primary reason behind this is that felons should be identifiable and avoidable once they're released from jail after serving their sentence. So this is prioritizing the public safety. And they also argue that the mugshots should be as close to the actual appearance, like I said, of the offender as possible to encourage people to actually report any suspicious behaviors and reduce the likelihood of similar crimes in the future as well. And the public's opinion is that felons are individuals who have grossly violated the fundamental rights of people, right? Innocent people. Therefore, they really deserve to have their identity publicized and criticized.
Right. I think that's a very strong argument that you mentioned. Some are saying if these criminals have already stripped off the fundamental human rights of another human being, why should their rights be overly protected? Where do you stand on this issue?
Well, I absolutely agree with Chihi, and I am for releasing the mugshots, but there are obviously a lot of, well, that very small percent, they have concerns that, if we make this mandatory disclosure of mugshots, affects the families, basically, of those people who are, innocent until proven guilty, or even the fact that if they are even proven guilty, that it might cause them harm or mental stress that they might suffer. Personally, I don't think this is a good enough reason or strong enough reason for us not to release the photos, because I think, as I said, it is in the public's interest to know. If we have to understand as well that if we give the benefit of the doubt to police officers, they do a lot of investigating into, obviously, a suspect. They're not just going to release a mugshot or a photo of this person unless they've done their research. And so by the time that this person has been, put out to the public, it means that, they're more than likely, hopefully in most cases, going to be the ones that committed the crime.
That's a very good point, Walter, because last week we did discuss a very similar topic. We talked about the public actually disclosing the information of suspects out there. But the difference with last week and this week is that the police would be the ones revealing these photos and information, specifically mugshots. And we asked if our viewers were for or against revealing mugshots, and here's what 3 of them had to say. Take a look at the screen to find out. Let's start with Tiris Bell. Tiris Bell said in the United States, it depends. For adults, mugshots are usually considered public records, meaning that anyone can access them. Of course, there are restrictions. Jamu Ojisan said, I think it's better to publish their mugshots. Society has the right to know, especially when the crime is heinous. And Shar said, for adults, mugshots should be available only after being convicted of a crime. If that person is found to be not guilty, their reputation and that of their families could be tarnished irreparably by public opinion. So that's all our viewers' comments. Thank you so much for sharing your insights there. And now I would like to expand our discussion as to find out how mugshots are dealt with other parts of the world, starting with you, Chi.
Well, it's common practice in the US and Europe to release mugshots of individuals to media or on websites. And regardless of the severity of the offense, it's quite different in the US from our country because authorities take mugshots of individuals upon their arrest. And recently, a mugshot of former US President Trump was released. It was the first time in August for Trump to have had his mugshot taken. And there's also mugshots of famous figures like Tiger Woods, as you see in 2017. He was suspected for driving under influence. There's James Brown. And there's also Paris Hilton and other celebrities such as Hugh Grant, who have also been made public and even sold as merchandise as well. Now, the right of the public to be informed about crimes and to protect themselves is prioritized over the human rights of these criminals. And also in neighboring Japan, although there's no official mugshot publication system, it's a well-established principle there in the country to report real names in the media. Faces and real names are often made public, reported, as they are considered important measures of the public safety.
All for public safety. How are other countries doing it?
Well, for Australia, it is obviously common practice like the US and Europe. I know that if you are even suspected of a murder, that people very well know about what's happening, the name, sometimes even the location. What I just remembered is that here in Korea, we do have an application for sex offenders that actually releases images of their face. And though I find it interesting that that hasn't been like an interesting topic to cover as well when it comes to releasing the faces of people, because I know that with that application, you can actually find out exactly where they live, what they look like, how old they are, and also I believe their name. So the fact that this is a debate that is still happening when we already kind of have these measures in place is quite interesting.
But I think the limitation to that application, though, if you're in the area, you can see it. If you're a resident in the same district living with a sex offender, you have access to this information. But if you're not a resident, you're not able to access this information or share it. So that's another debate we'll be talking about in the future. But in the meantime, let's find out more about how mugshots are dealt with in other parts of the world, and if there's any leeway or room for Korea to actually adopt any of the policies that's been implemented globally. We're now going to talk to an associate professor of criminal justice from Rutgers University Newark. It's Dr. Sarah Lageson. Great to have you on our show.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Dr. Lageson, could you tell us a bit more about how the United States decides to reveal a mugshot? What's the exact process like?
Sure. When a person is arrested and booked at a local jail in the U.S., typically they're fingerprinted and their photograph is taken. But each state does have slightly different rules about revealing a mugshot to the public, and sometimes even within a single state, some local jurisdictions have their own set of rules. But generally across the U.S., a mugshot is considered a public record, so the police can release it to the public, sometimes via their social media or on their website that tracks people entering the jail. And once it's online, local news organizations, or really anybody on the internet, can legally repost that mugshot. Unfortunately, this also means that some extortion websites, public shaming websites, will also copy and repost those mugshots.
Before we go on to the second question, are there any regulations to stop that, though?
Some states in recent years have begun to pass new laws. Some of those laws target the extortion websites. So they say a website cannot charge a takedown fee to have a mugshot removed. Some local jurisdictions, such as San Francisco, have decided not to reveal mugshots for low-level offenses and to only reveal a mugshot if the person is at large or if the police need input from the public and there's a compelling reason to release the mugshot. But there's a lot of differences between jurisdictions. It's certainly an issue that's evolving over time.
Right. So, Professor, well, apart from a mugshot then, how much information about a criminal is revealed to the public?
Quite a bit. This too varies by jurisdiction, but typically the mugshot will include a person's full name. The police can also reveal the arrested person's date of birth, sometimes their home address or the city that they live in, their height, their weight, their skin color, their eye color, and sometimes even whether or not they have tattoos.
Yeah, actually, it's really quite interesting because what I've noticed as well on social media, especially on Facebook, is that you don't even have to be a suspect. You could just be a person of interest to the police. And what they do is they put up what you just mentioned, a lot of about the person's height, weight, color, also tattoos that may be revealing to identify the person. But as a criminal justice professor, what do you think are the pros and cons behind revealing a criminal's mugshot or personal information to the public?
Well, some people argue that releasing the mugshots helps keep the police accountable because the public can see who's being arrested, and that this overall would lead to more transparency. And of course, the police argue that it helps them to get tips and more information from the public. But I think there's a lot more cons in the way that it's unfolded in the U.S. So millions of people are arrested each year in the United States, and most of them are accused of very low-level offenses. Many people are struggling with mental health issues and are just not the type of people that police are deeply investigating. So when that mugshot is released by the police and then onto the internet, a person can be shamed for the rest of their life. And you mentioned this earlier, but it's important to remember that in the U.S., a mugshot just reflects the arrest, not a conviction. So the photos are really of legally innocent people who may have been wrongfully arrested or have their charges dropped later once they see a judge. But the mugshot stays online, and this really implies that that person is guilty. Like I said, it gets posted to many, many websites. Sometimes people are paying those hefty fees of thousands of dollars to have a mugshot removed from one website, and then it just shows up on another website. And the research I've done has shown all these instances of discrimination that can happen based on an old mugshot, sometimes from a decade ago, when a person applies for a job or rents an apartment, or even if they're online dating or meeting other families at their children's school, or they want to volunteer at their church. And that's because their name is attached to it. So just doing a simple internet search for somebody's name will reveal the photo.
I see. Then, Professor, very briefly, I have one last question for you. Do you think South Korea is going the right direction as to when and how it's revealing its mugshots? It's quite rare, actually.
I think the rarity is the right move. I think that being very thoughtful about the rationale for releasing the mugshot is the most important policy consideration. The problem in the U.S. is that this is just a bulk disclosure of any mugshot. And of course, this reflects all sorts of the problems we have with the criminal legal system and bias in the system. And it really marks a lot of people as criminal when they're not. But it sounds to me from your reporting that in South Korea, this is a very thoughtful exercise with public support and public buy-in. So as long as the framework remains around a compelling or heinous case, that seems like a positive direction.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Lageson. It was a pleasure hearing from you today.
Thank you.
Dr. Lageson mentioned very interesting points, and it was a good comparison with South Korea and the United States. So based on what we just heard now, how would you guys like to see the mugshot situation go on from here in Korea?
Well, I liked how she said we're going in the right direction because we're being really thoughtful and careful with our process. And I feel like we are really making progress in the country because recently the National Assembly has suggested some changes to the current law. And according to these changes, the release of a suspect's face must occur within 30 days of the decision to do so. And while I believe in giving people a second chance, this should not apply to those who have committed a felony. And in this case, the safety of the public, of course, must be given priority over the human rights of these criminals.
Right, I agree. As Dr. Lageson said, if they're low-level offenses, and if they're young, for instance, if they're teenagers, I think that's another issue and angle we need to focus on, whether just revealing everyone mugshots is the right answer, because as she mentioned, they could be uploaded and exploited online. But at the same time, I do understand why the majority of the public, as you mentioned, 95%, right?
Yeah.
9 out of 10 Koreans actually want the suspect's information to be disclosed, and I partly think that has to do with how cautious the police are as to be revealing a mugshot and when they decide to disclose one's information. What do you think about that?
I think it's quite interesting, actually. Dr. Lageson really did open my eyes to certain points of view that I didn't think about. Example would be like when a person would go on a date and all they have to do is, Google the person's name and it comes up. So I did think that that was a very good point, that it is a very negative thing to have, especially even if you were considered innocent. I just hope the public are a bit more, I guess, mature about the whole situation and do more deeper dive on the person if they're found innocent or guilty, for example. And I think a lot of people are quick to judge if you were, let's say, convicted of or not convicted of a crime, but you still haven't, arrested for anything, even if it wasn't your fault. So I do understand from that side of the story. I'm hoping that it's actually something that can be. There's obviously fine lines when it comes to crime. It's not such a simple thing of a yes and no. The way that we should be releasing mugshots is obviously when someone is convicted, but when we are very certain that this person has committed the crime, in my opinion. The minor offences that she talked about is also interesting. I don't think it's necessary to put up someone's mugshot if they were drink driving, for instance, or even if it was a very minor case of public indecency, whatever it may be. So those minor ones, they don't need to be public.
But then again, how can we consider a crime to be minor or low offense, right? I think that's why it's so hard when we're dealing with criminal justice. It's so subjective. There's so many different definitions and standards we all have. And hopefully we'll bring this onto the table more often so we can have a better idea. But in the meantime, we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Chi Ji.
Thank you.
And Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
All right, and thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are News Generation.
In Gyeongsang, Namdo, Sangcheong, we're opening the Dongi Bogam. You can meet a variety of Hanbang, Korean medicine for vitality, Korean medicine for healing, Korean medicine for joy, Korean medicine for expo.